Welcome back, everybody. This is Pastured Poultry Talk, episode number 50. I'm your host, Mike Badger, and I'm excited today to bring you a special guest. His name's Grady Phelan. You know him from the first 30 episodes that we've recorded on Pastured Poultry Talk. Grady and I launched this podcast back in the spring of 2015 as a way to kind of inspire producers and just talk about pastured poultry in a podcast setting. We thought there was a real need for that, and I think we're being proved right about that. But sadly for me, Grady left the podcast in the early 2016 to take over more duties and fulfill really his role at Cobb Creek Farm, where he's the farm manager there in Hillsboro, Texas. And Grady's got a lot going on. We're going to give him a chance to introduce and tell us exactly what all that stuff is. But he's raising broilers and processing them 5 days a week. He's got a large scale housing system for on pasture, on daily move pasture. And he's currently driving, making deliveries. So any background noise you hear will just add to the flavor of our talk. So welcome, Grady. I'm glad you could be back on. Why don't you go ahead and just take a moment. Tell us exactly what you got going on there at Cobb Creek.
Thanks, Mike. It sure is good to be back. I sure did enjoy doing Pastured Poultry Talk, those first however many episodes we did together. And things are going good at Cobb Creek. We kind of ramped up. I had to kind of shut down the poultry talk because we opened our facility and my life just got really busy. But more on that, I'm sure, as we go on. Kind of the numbers at Cobb Creek, we raise 900 birds a week year-round right now. This fall, we'll probably jump up to 1,200 birds a week. So that's about 45 to 60,000 a year, depending on how we ramp up this fall. And our main focus is pasture poultry, the broiler edition. We don't do any eggs, but we do operate a state-inspected slaughterhouse 5 days a week and butcher for ourselves and other people. So that pretty much eats up all my time along with my family.
Yeah, awesome. What all is happening there in your slaughterhouse? Are you doing just broilers, or do you got some other things that you're working on there?
Yeah, so I only grow broilers at the moment. I'd like to get into the turkey scene eventually, but we stay ahead of our demand for poultry products enough to do that. But we do butcher turkeys for other people, and I've got a busy fall ahead of me. We also have started doing rabbits. For some reason, the government allows rabbit chickens to be kind of the same facility. They got grouped together somewhere along the way. And we also, so chickens, turkeys, rabbits, and I'm going to try some guineas here in a couple weeks. We got a lady bringing me like 25. But other than that, we just do that. And then for those products, we are a full-service custom shop, so we can do whole birds or cut-ups. We have actually started grinding chicken and turkey. I sell ground chicken. I don't make any sausage yet, but we just do plain ground chicken. And then I do custom grinding for other people, too. So I had a guy bring me, 25, 30 turkeys the other day, and we ground up a good portion of them for him to sell 1-pound packages of ground turkeys. So
your rabbits, then, because you're inspected by the state, then any rabbit that you process for your customers, they're allowed to put that into sales channels? They're allowed to sell that to restaurants, chefs?
Yep. Yeah, anything. So we actually have three grants actually at my plant. We have a grant of exemption for poultry, or not exemption, sorry, grant of inspection for poultry, so that covers turkeys and chicken and guineas and that kind of stuff, fowl. We have a grant of voluntary inspection, which covers the rabbits. Rabbits are funny. They're non-amenable to the federal government, but they're amenable to Texas. But that still means, all that means to me is that I still have to have a voluntary grant. And so we have that. And then I also have a custom poultry grant that I've never used. But if I ever wanted to butcher on a Saturday for like 4-H kids that are just going to take their birds home, I could do that. And that's kind of what I'm planning to do this spring when the local show, other shows happen. We'll be able to, because a lot of those kids, obviously can't deliver their own chicken because they can't drive. And then their mom and dad's work Monday through Friday. So I'm going to pick a couple Saturdays, probably the Saturday right after the fair, of course, and then, maybe another for different fairs around, and we'll do custom exempt poultry. So that stuff can't be resold, but everything else, the rabbit and the inspected poultry, can be resold 100 times over and over again, as long as it stays inside the boundaries of Texas, and then of course as long as it stays cold. It's funny, there's not really any regulation about as far as inspection goes about keeping it cold, but then the health departments are all over that. That's the county thing.
I didn't know you had branched out into those. I think you're going to like the guineas when you get to them. Going to move on, and can you tell me, Grady, how do you use pastured poultry to bring revenue into Cobb Creek? And if you could just kind of put that in the poultry operation into context of how that fits into your overall farm.
Yeah, so for me, pasture poultry is the centerpiece. Cobb Creek Farm as a whole also does graze cattle. We do some custom grazing, and we've done some heifer development and that kind of thing. We don't have a developed beef, beef sales, so it's all live animals. We did have sheep in the past, but we sold those just because I was in charge of those, and the chickens took too much of my time. So, we're basically, as far as I'm concerned, we're a 100% pasture poultry meat farm, and so the vast majority of our income comes from selling chicken, and then a pretty good chunk of the income comes from butchering other people's birds too. So that's easy money. So they walk in with a bird, I butcher it, and they give me money, and they walk out, and that's real easy. I don't have to put it in the freezer and try to sell it later. If
you can get the processing part of your poultry down, and that's a whole other enterprise, as you very well know, Grady, that our community is just begging for more options there in the processing.
Yeah, for sure. That we're one of, oh goodness, I think there's 3 state inspected facilities in the whole state of Texas, 27 million people, and there's 1 USDA facility. And so there's 4 facilities in the state of Texas that I know of that'll take small quantities of birds. Everybody else that butchers in Texas is like a Sanderson Farm, Tyson, Pilgrim Pride type facility, and you can't call them up, and bring them 100 birds.
Right.
They do 100 birds a minute. They do over 100 birds a minute, so they're not ready to handle that kind of client.
Yeah, right. And just so everybody understands the terms that Grady's using, state inspected means the state of Texas is watching over those birds, and they're confined to within the borders of the state. USDA inspected, of course, being federally inspected, and those birds can enter commerce pretty much anywhere in the country. They can travel across state lines, which is the big difference there. I know you probably get a lot of people that come into your place that say you're USDA inspected, but that's technically not correct.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people say that, or a lot of people also say words like organic, and they friends of mine say, "Oh yeah, he's got a USDA plant and he raises organic chicken," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's not at all true." For the layman who's not in the food world or in the or free range is another one,
Right.
They don't quite understand all the terminology, so sometimes that's the only way they know how to communicate with their friends.
Right. Yeah. But, no doubt. It is a confusing space out there. You're obviously got a lot going on right now at Cobb Creek. Things appear to be moving very well, but I want you to take us back to a point that you would characterize as your worst pastured poultry moment to date. What was that one thing that just kind of...
Well, there's so many, Mike. I don't know where to begin. I've been raising birds for, almost 10 years. And there's a couple big moments that were terrible. But the one that I remember the most, and I was there on the farm and had to walk up and see it before anybody else, was probably when I was managing Polyface's rental farm called Briarmore. And we had, and some of you guys listening probably remember this from Joel's writing, but we had the derecho or Jericho, or it depends on where you're from, how you say that, but it's a Spanish word for straight, and it meant straight line winds. And we had like 90 mile an hour straight line winds at the farm. And so, short story, it blew in one night. We actually had friends over for dinner. They tried to go home and couldn't because of trees in the road, so they just came back and spent the night. And a tree in our front yard fell over. And that night, I was planning on catching baby chicks I say baby chicks, 3-week-old chicks to put out the pasture the next morning. And the storm was crazy, so I didn't get up there. It finally blew over, and about midnight, I went up there into the brooder and caught all the chicks, got them in crates, and left them in there like normal. And the next morning, I go up there to go load them up and to take them out. And I look out in the field, and half my shelters are gone, just gone. And my egg mobiles are sitting right there, too. And it looked like somebody used a big can opener and just filleted them open on the field. And there were hens everywhere, broilers everywhere, dead broilers, lots of dead hens. I don't remember, the numbers on death loss. I think I forget that on purpose.
Right.
It wasn't crazy. It wasn't like 50% or anything, but it was probably 20%. It was a big number. And so I went out there and just caught all the broilers I could find and put them in pens that I had. And then, I collected eggs out of the nest boxes on their side for a couple of days. I didn't really lay in them very good.
Right.
But the beauty of being at Polyface is the giant workforce. And so it took them a couple of days, but the crew at Polyface, all the interns came over, and within like 3 hours, they had my egg mobiles put back together. I say 3 hours. It was probably all day long. They put my egg mobiles back together, got them going again, and they had built new shelters for me to use and brought those over for me. So it was crazy, but we made it through there, and it kind of shows the necessity for friends and farming together. A lot of times as farmers, we find ourselves alone, and it's not necessarily our choice. Sometimes there's nobody around to befriend, but if you're a farmer and you've got neighbors that you haven't met yet, go meet them, because you might need them one day and they might need you.
Yeah, that's right. That Polyface team came over and helped you. That's really one of the things I try to promote, getting to know people and just knowing your other producers, so that at least you have somebody to call or somebody that you can form some relationships with. Because I think if you would have had to manage that all on your own, that might have been a much tougher situation.
Yeah, it would have been pretty terrible.
One more question here in this line of thought. If you had to think about your biggest weakness as a producer, what would that be?
Probably, believe it or not, my biggest weakness is probably lack of knowledge in the area of poultry nutrition and health. I'm really good at systems and, logistics and strategies, but when I walk into a brooder and look at some chicks, I know something's wrong, but it takes me a while to figure it out, and I always have to call Jeff Maddox or Casey at Fertrell, or I get on the APA forum, which is wonderful. So I don't know if it's necessarily a weakness that can't be overcome because of the APA forum and because of resources like Fertrell and their nutritionists there, but it's definitely not something that, well, put it this way, when somebody calls me and asks me questions about health, I always tell them, I'm not really sure. Or they ask me, what should I feed my chickens? I always tell them, well, don't ask me. There's lots of other people that know a whole lot more about it than me. But that being said, that, I get better and better at that. Definitely being the manager of a slaughterhouse and seeing birds of all different kinds on all kinds of feed, I learn a lot about nutrition because I get to look at birds that are really awesome, and I get to look at birds that are really terrible, and then I get to ask the producer, okay, tell me about how you raised them, tell me about what you fed them. And so probably in another 5 years I'll be fantastic at nutrition, but right now I really rely heavily on Jeff and Fertrell and the APA forum. So
interestingly enough, when you talk about your weaknesses, most people who are successful in any given business or enterprise or activity, they're self-aware enough to know, where they need the help the most, and that's kind of calling a friend, and Jeff's a good friend to call. But so if we flip that around, then what would you say is your biggest strength?
Probably the best thing that I do is see patterns, and I'm pretty good at engineering and construction, and pretty good at solving problems. logistics stuff. So anything that has to do with manpower or construction thought or, some kind of system, I can build a great system. Sometimes another one of my weaknesses is I don't always like to keep those systems going in motion. I like to be creative and move on to something else. So I have to keep myself at the task at hand a lot. But, I notice myself when I'm talking to people about, what's going on and their troubles, a lot of times I'll see something that they haven't really thought of. They'll be telling me about a problem, and I'll ask them a question, and they'll go, "Oh no!" And I said, "Well, here's the pattern. Do you see this?" "No, I didn't see that." So, So I don't know how you would put that, but seeing patterns, building systems, and designing equipment have been something that have been really beneficial to me, especially in the last 2 years as we built Cobb Creek from the ground up and built a slaughterhouse and started a whole new mobile range coop structure that's for poultry. So
right, and
that's kind of what I enjoy.
Yeah, and I would just say that that's not really all that surprising because you're currently scaling to go in somewhere around the 45 to 60,000 broilers a year, and you can't really do that efficiently, which is really the kind of some of the things that you just described there, without being able to solve problems, work on those logistics, as you said, and just generally get a system in place to manage that.
Yeah. Well, and solving problems is probably the most important thing. It's definitely become more and more of a strength of mine the longer I've been at Cobb Creek, because the owner, my direct boss, Cody Smith, he's a great problem solver, and it's one of those things, we just have this idea that there's no problem too big we can't fix. If we just work on it, think hard enough, keep your head down, keep moving, keep working, and as long as you don't get bogged down in the problem itself and you just start looking for solutions, you'll be okay. Because the reality is, all business is solving problems. You're either solving a problem that somebody has, you're fixing a flat tire, you're feeding somebody that's hungry, you're, what are you doing? Or you're creating a product that solves a problem. And so, that's not necessarily my strongest strength, but it's becoming more of one the longer I've worked for Cody, the longer I've, done this large scale pasture poultry. Because believe it or not, problems happen every day.
Yeah, and I love that mindset that no problem is too big. Given that you're solving problems every day, what's been the most valuable innovation or improvement in your pasture poultry business?
Yeah, so hands down, the mobile range coop. Not my original idea as far as the design of a large-scale pasture poultry system, but definitely gathered some ideas from other folks and worked with Polytex to come up with our design that we sell. There's a couple of different designs out there too, but just having a larger quantity of birds in one area and shortening chore time, but still allowing for the principles of pasture poultry to be just robust and right there in the middle of everything is huge. And I used to tout that you could service one mobile range coop, which holds 600 birds. I used to say you could do it in 10 minutes or less. Well, that's what I used to be able to do. And now my crew, who are very efficient and effective at chores, decided that they were going to start putting two together and running two at a time. And so they moved the first one, then they pull the second one up, and then they feed and check water and stuff. And they can do two men, or it's actually a man and a woman, can do chores for two mobile range coops in 15 minutes or less. So they took my 20 minutes and cut 5 minutes off of it. And so it's so big because we can do the other day we had 3 people on chores on Labor Day. I said, hey, everybody show up. We're going to knock out chores. We're going to go and enjoy Labor Day.
Right.
And we did 10 mobile range coops in an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
And so 70 minutes. So we did 7 minutes a coop. And it was, and we weren't like running around and being crazy. We were just real efficient with every step, and being able to move 600 birds at one time is phenomenal. It's great, and it's easier on your body. I mean, I still have some 12 by 12s that are 4 feet tall. I call them Texas Edition field shelters, and I would never tell anybody not to start there because that's where you should start. But I'm only 31 and I'm in pretty good shape, but still pulling those things. I've got three of them. That I have some laying hens from my own house in. I imagine when I used to pull 24 of them by myself, I was in really good shape. But as far as making stuff more efficient and easier on your body, the mobile range coop does a lot of that. So it's my favorite thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad. Part of what I like about having you on early on in these questions, or in this new format that we're doing with the podcast, is I don't necessarily want to talk to everybody who's raising 40,000 birds, but I want to demonstrate that it's possible. And what you said here in just the last minute or two can't be emphasized enough, that you're moving 6,000 birds in just over an hour's time.
Right.
When you slice it up, that is, compared to what you do individually with the smaller square pens, is huge. That's a huge shift in perspective and thinking, and I want to make sure I'm emphasizing it because personally I see a lot of banter out there where people are real sour on the potential of pastured poultry, and they're not plugged into professional groups like APA, so they miss a lot of this stuff, which is part of the issue. There's a new direction happening in pastured poultry, and Grady just illustrated it with his mobile range coop. And as he said, he's not the only one. There's others, and there's people building their own variants of that. So it's really pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, something just to point that out in numbers, Mike. The labor for one chicken, if I pay somebody $10 an hour to do that work, is 50 cents per chicken. And that's the labor for the lifetime of the chicken. And that includes catching every time we catch. And it's 50 cents. That's field labor. Now, of course, there's some more labor in the slaughterhouse, but I treat that like its own entity. So I charge myself what I charge other people to slaughter birds. So the field labor for our system is 50 cents a bird. And when your bird is retailing at $15 to $20, depending on how big it is and what your prices are, that's such a small piece of the cost. 50 cents. It's unreal.
Agree. Given where you are now, you said about 10 years into this. If you were able to look back 10 years and see your previous self and say, "Hey Grady, I know this thing that you should do right now," what would it be?
Probably just all the experience, which is really, really hard to give yourself. I mentioned earlier about walking into a brooder and knowing something's wrong. You have to walk into a brooder 1,000 times and listen to chicks peep at you before you really know, hey, there's something not right here. Or, for instance, knowing how to butcher and how to slaughter, that takes about 1,000. If you do the same thing 1,000 times, I'm convinced that you can move on and learn another skill and retain that one to keep practicing. Well, it takes a long time to get to 1,000 unless you're apprenticing on a farm, which is why apprenticeships are so important, or unless you're working for somebody who's just doing that. So the same goes for feeding chickens and that kind of stuff. So if there's any way, and I know this is probably what everybody thinks, if there's any way for me to take the knowledge I have solely from experience, not the book knowledge, not all that stuff, I would obviously want to hand those books that I've read now to myself, but I would take that knowledge. In other words, I would want Grady now to hang out with Grady at age 20 for like a month and do chores together. And I can't imagine anything more valuable. And that's why apprenticeships or internships are so important, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're hanging out with somebody that's done it so much that, to go and spend a year and make zero money at a farm like Polyface or like anywhere else that's doing these kind of things, man, it's like free money. Right. It's like printing money, having a money tree, because you're not going to make mistakes on your own dollar. You're going to make mistakes on their dollar, and they get to train you exactly, and they know all these things. So, yeah, I would definitely go back in time and share, spend about a month with myself raising birds.
Awesome. Grady, we got just a few more questions to go. A couple quick questions, couple quick answers, and then we'll put this episode to rest. So we've all received some advice along the way. What's the best advice that you've been given?
The best advice I've ever been given is from my dad. And he told me when we were doing, when you do a business deal with somebody, he said, leave a little money on the table. And what he meant was always make sure that they're benefiting more than you're benefiting. Not too much, just a little bit. And that way, when you leave the deal, they're happy about it and want to make that deal happen again. You know, nobody wants to do business with somebody that's trying to rob them a little bit or take a little bit. I'm not saying that even Steven's a bad thing, but if you could benefit them a little more than you benefit yourself, it'll go a long way. And he was right 100% of the time. Every time I've done a deal and I've tried to make it in my favor, it always backfired on me. And every time I've done a deal and I put it in their favor a little bit, it always went well. And that deal happened every time, over and over again. And so that's probably my best advice.
That is great advice. We've talked about this a little bit, but tell me about a habit that you have that makes you successful.
The best habit I have right now is waking up and being very reliable for what I do. We get up real early every morning, and I set an alarm every night, and I'm there, rain or shine, no matter what, to do what I need to do to make sure that our farm keeps going. And that sounds kind of, of course you have to do that. But let me tell you, there are a lot of people that have a habit of not doing that. And it's really, really hard on their business and really, really hard on their relationships with their employees and with their managers and that kind of thing. So for me, the one thing that I think about every night before I go to bed is, okay, tomorrow's a new day. You need to get up and you need to perform as expected to those around you. And the flip of that coin is I don't get angry at people that don't perform as I expect them to perform either, because we're all human and we all fail at some point. And so having grace and waking up and going are super important in my life.
Can you recommend a book or a resource that our listeners should check out?
Oh, if you're raising pasture poultry, there are a bunch of books. We talked about feed nutrition and how I'm not very good at that. Well, Jeff Maddox wrote a book and he's got a new edition out. And Mike, do you know the exact name of his book?
It's Pastured Poultry, Feeding and Management is the new title.
Yeah. So that's a big one for people raising pasture poultry. And an oldie, but definitely the place to start is Pasture Poultry Profits with Joel Salatin. For those who are not familiar, like I said, things have changed. It's an older book. It's got some age on it, but the principles are there. If you've never thought about raising birds for profit on pasture and butchering them, you need to start right there. Read that book, and then join APA. You'll go a long way.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Let's pretend that I plopped you down on a farm tomorrow. I gave you $500 for your pocket. You have all your experience and knowledge that you do right now, but you basically are starting from nothing. I want you to describe how you take your $500 and turn it into a profitable pastured poultry business.
Oh man, so $500. The first thing I would do is marketing and do some research and figure out who my client's going to be. What am I in a location where I'm going to do wholesale restaurants? Am I in a location that has really awesome farmers markets and I want to be there? Am I in a place that's flooded with chicken at the farmers market, so I need to do something different? Is home delivery a big option? So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to spend money and buy a website, build a website, or hire somebody to do that. $500, you can't hire anybody. You're going to have to do that on your own. And then I'll probably start some kind of CSA. $500 can go a long way, and especially if you've got some scrap lumber, or some friends, or some family that you can use their land and that kind of stuff. But instead, I think I would reach out and say, hey, this is what I've done. This is what I want to do. There's a better way. Do you want me to raise your poultry for you? And get people signed up and sell them a share and get that going. And I have friends that do CSAs, and they're awesome. They obviously the cash flow is really good because you get your money up front, and the client is on board. The customers, really wants to help you out, wants you to succeed, and they're going to want to come see the farm. They're going to want to come see the chickens, And they're going to be what I call a top-tier customer. They're going to be the ones that are going to buy your chicken, rain or shine, 60 miles, 10 miles, doesn't matter how far they have to go. But they understand why your product is so much better than anybody else's. And so I would spend that $500 finding those people is what I would do.
Great answer. So that's all the questions that I have. I just want to, well, I guess one more, I lied. So where can people learn more about you?
Okay, yeah. So the farm I run is Cobb Creek Farm. So it's COBBCREEKFARM.com. And that'll give you some information about the farm in general, what we do. It'll give you some contact information for us. You can also look me up directly at GradyPhelan.com. So GRADY, P is in Paul, HELAN.com. And that's just got that's just a landing page for you to find my email and phone number and all kinds of stuff. I do food safety consulting and farm consulting and speaking, and occasionally I do a podcast, when Mike interviews me. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And then email is really good. But if you're a phone person, give me a call, leave me a message, and I'll try to get back to you.
Yeah, great, Grady. And, thank you so much for coming on here, chatting with me, for really fitting in on what I think is a milestone episode at number 50. I sincerely appreciate it. It's been great. It's been a nice chat. Hey, that'll wrap us for this episode. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check us out on the web. Our home is at pasturedpoultrytalk.com. pasturedpoultrytalk.com. Never miss another episode again. Go there, find out how. Till next time, thank you.